Warrior recently received a lot of buffs, but did it actually fix the class? With this new season climb, I've been trying to put that to the test. This is the list that I've kind of landed on for now, at least. We're going to take a quick look at it. I call this Disruption Warrior just because of all the disruption that we're able to inflict on our opponent's game plan. Right off the bat, we're looking at Call to the Stand. I know a lot of people aren't playing this card now in Warrior, but I do like it just because you can potentially hit a pesky minion. Potentially you can catch one of your opponent's Astalors, and that shuts down the chain so that they can't get to the final one. Or maybe you pull the final one without your opponent actually being able to get off the battle cry. You can also hit key minions, for example, against the aggro mage. Sometimes you can pull the Frostweave Dungeoneer out to the board. Battle cry doesn't go off. That means no 1/1s. They don't draw a frost spell. So I think it has a lot of uses. It's really cheap. And you can also use it when you know you're going into a brawl turn, or use it on the same turn that you're going to be using a shield shatter, just to get an extra minion out of your opponent's hand and to be able to clear the board. You do have to be just a little bit careful with this. You don't necessarily want to use this against an Evolved Shaman and pull out a Neptulon on, turn 2 or turn 3. So it does take some thought, but I like the card in this style of deck. You can see we're also running Shield Slams. I mean, that's just typical. We're going to be gaining a lot of armor with this deck, and this allows us to be able to remove a threatening minion. Astalor of our own. Bash, nice little gain armor card and kind of an anti-aggro card. I would keep this card in the mulligan against aggro decks specifically, which we're seeing a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of Unholy Death Knight, and I'm seeing a lot of aggro mage, as well as some other aggro decks that have been thrown into the mix, so pretty quality card, I think. Conqueror's Banner, actually one of the more recent additions to this deck for me. Originally, I was running Watch Posts here just because I wanted to slow down my opponent, but I found that Conqueror's Banner is just a little bit better. If you only draw one, it's kind of bad, 2 mana just to draw 1 card, but if you draw 2, it's insane value, and if you draw 3, it's absolutely crazy. So prior to putting this card in the deck, I felt like I was missing a little bit of card draw, wasn't necessarily drawing into my answers or my win conditions often enough. So I wanted to add in this little extra bit of card draw here. Just 1 copy of Forged in the Flame. We are running a couple of weapons. We also have Rakara, so we can take advantage of that to be able to draw a lot of cards if we have an empty hand. Frozen Bucklers and Heavy Plates and Shield Blocks, of course. We're just gaining armor here. Igneous Lava Gorger, again, it's just armor. It's a little bit of a taunt, and it lets us take a look at the bottom of our deck with Dredge. We got the Outrider Axes. Sometimes you can swing face with these. We want to free our minds, make sure that we're thinking about the possibilities of what we can do with our deck. But a lot of times we're just going to trade this into a minion to be able to draw a card. Card draw good. Couple of Brawls. Again, we're just disrupting our opponent's game plan. Lots of aggro decks that are building these wide boards. Brawl is going to cut that down to just a single minion. Disruptive Spellbreaker, one of the cards that was recently buffed. It only gained 1 health, which wasn't as good as I personally hoped for. But this card is really interesting, again, in some of these aggro matchups. You drop this against aggro mage, and potentially you hit one of their frozen touches. And it's insane just for that. But then a lot of classes feel like they have to kill this. So they're spending their damage and their minions removing this rather than hitting us in the face, which is good for our game plan. Captain Galvangar, when you're running this many armor gain cards, it just makes sense. He comes down as a 9-round rush basically every time. Really easy to get up to that 15 armor. I actually like hard running Mr. Smite here because we're running Nelly, so we could potentially pick cheap pirates off of the Nelly to combine with the Mr. Smite, and this gives us a win condition. So I really look at this as more of a mid-range deck rather than a control deck, because yes, we're disrupting our opponent's game plan, but we're able to get a little bit of minions out on the board. We can hit our opponent in the face as needed, and then we can start to put together some damage as we get into the mid/late game to be able to finish off our opponent and really not just be sitting there just trying to remove everything that our opponent is doing. So Nelly and Mr. Smite, the combo is pretty nice here. Nelly, of course, also buffed. The powers that we discover off of this have their mana cost reduced by 2. So by hard running Smite, we can potentially pick 3 pirates that cost 3 or less. On turn 10, we can play all of those, and you can actually get pretty reliably, 15 damage from hand, even if you don't have a weapon. Of course, if you have a weapon equipped, and you can potentially hit that Bloodsail Buccaneer, then you can do a lot more damage than that. So nice little combo there. Rakara, the hero card, just really strong. It's armor gain, it's a weapon, and it's a better hero power. And then, of course, Shield Shatter, as we already touched on just a little bit ago. General game plan for the deck is we want to disrupt our opponent's game plan, make sure that they're not able to execute what they're trying to do, and then as we move into the late game, we're starting to potentially swing face. We're starting to lay down a Captain Galvangar, just the big 9/9 minion, something to hit our opponent with, and something that they feel like they need to address. And then we're looking to close the game out with something like a Mr. Smite, Nelly combo with the pirates that are going to be coming off the Nelly. The deck has actually been working pretty well for me. It feels like it's pretty well tuned. I've been enjoying it, and so I wanted to present that to you. Basic mulligan for this deck, a little bit of it depends on what you're up against. This is an aggro meta, so against aggro, I'm keeping Bash. I'm always keeping the Conqueror's Banner. I like keeping Shield Block just because it is card draw. We need to be able to draw into some of our other tools. And I like keeping the weapon as well. If you feel like you're going to get just exceptional value, you could potentially keep Disruptive Spellbreaker. It's not going to be a keep in every matchup. This is really much more situational. If you're on the coin, sometimes it gains some value to be able to keep this. And if you're against an opponent that discarding one of their spells is going to be really good. But for example, if you're against Unholy Death Knight, yes, it's going to be good to get rid of their Grave Strength because that's their Bloodlust effect, but they're running so few spells in the deck, it's really unlikely that you're actually going to get the value out of discarding your opponent's spell. So be a little bit careful if you are going to keep this, but again, situationally, this could be a good keep as well. Looks like we're up against Demon Hunter here. Not totally sure what Demon Hunters are playing. It's still early in the meta. It's also the beginning of a new season climb at the time of making this video. So I'm not totally sure what they're running. I'm going to keep the Bash. If this is like a spell Demon Hunter, if they're running the weapon, the Scythe, this is going to be a bad keep because there won't be any minions to use it on, although you can go face with it. Nelly, we definitely toss, and I'm going to keep the Conqueror's Banner here. Could be aggro. I've seen some people also running the Outcast Demon Hunter, so that's the reason why I'm going to keep the Bash here. A little bit easier to mulligan if you know more about what you're up against, but the meta's not settled right now. And that makes Hearthstone a lot more enjoyable, at least to me. So we see the Soul Eater side. That means our opponent is not running minions. That means unlikely we're going to be able to get a lot of value out of the Bash here. So we're just going to pass it over to our opponent, nothing to do. Next turn, likely just Conqueror's Banner. Possibility that they could be running the Relic package, in which case we may be able to bash one of the minions that would come off of that. And we're just going to go ahead and draw some cards here, I hope. And unfortunately, we miss on the Galvangar there. We hit a Disruptive Spellbreaker. That's going to be really good, potentially, against this Demon Hunter deck. And we missed Call to the Stand, but Call to the Stand, not very good. So we paid 2 mana to draw 1 card. That's not a really good outcome. But the card that we did get is going to have some value. Likely we want to wait until after the coin has been played. We also expect that this card is just going to get removed. Our opponent is going to be able to remove this. So we're only going to be able to discard 1 single spell out of our opponent's hand. But the good news is we are going to discount a spell from our opponent's hand, and then we're going to be relying on our ability to be able to gain armor, and then as the game goes by, we're going to be looking to close it out with our win conditions. We do see the Relic Vault come down. They are running the Relic package, and I'm just going to go ahead and Conqueror's Banner again. We want to try to get more cards in our hand for some additional resources. We hit a Brawl. That could potentially be really good against a wide board created by the Relics. Call to the Stand worthless, so we don't need that. And we miss on Frozen Buckler. So you can see Conqueror's Banner, at least in this matchup, not getting a whole lot of value because our opponent is, they're running cards that are, I guess, pretty equal in cost to our own cards. In aggro matchups, I think the Conqueror's Banner is significantly better just because they tend to have a lower curve, and we can take advantage of that. We see the minions come out. This is really not all that threatening, especially with a Shield Shatter in hand. We don't necessarily have a great way to develop the armor for this, but these minions aren't really anything to worry about here, so I think the play is to just get down the Lava Gorger. And interestingly enough, I would almost like to have the weapon for card draw here, but I feel like we're going to need the Rakara to be able to close out this game. And because these cards are on the bottom of our deck, until we draw the other Igneous Lava Gorger, we're not going to have the opportunity to be able to get Rakara again. And we have an additional copy of each one of these cards. So I'm going to take the Rakara. It's also the biggest armor gain that we're going to be able to get, at least for this particular turn. So when you dredge with that particular card and you're looking for what you want, you kind of have to balance it between what do I need right now and, you know, what we have in our hand versus what are we going to need, you know, a little bit down the line here. So we can see our opponent is actually very wide now. And I think we're going to want to make a bit of a defensive play because this damage is really going to start to add up. And it's probably going to be potentially 2 turns before we can play the Shield Shatter. We might have to play Shield Shatter on the same turn as Rakara. So we can actually just bash and Astalor to be able to remove these guys. Still leaves 10 power on the board for our opponent though. Could try Disruptive Spellbreaker. It's likely that they're going to have to remove it in some form or fashion. We could hit the coin, but we know that they're running nothing but spells, so it's pretty unlikely that we hit the coin because they have 5 cards in hand. I think maybe we actually just play the Spellbreaker. It spends our mana a little bit better than Bash and Astalor, and we potentially hit a decent card here, so it's a little bit close, but I think when you don't know what to do, you could potentially make the error on the side of just spending mana. Other option here might actually just be to brawl. I mean, we brawl this and we take a lot of damage off the board so that we don't end up going down too low. And I think I actually like that the best. We're just going to cut down our opponent's board here. No reason to take all that damage. When you lose with this deck, it's because you just end up taking too much damage. And we get a nice little roll there. They only have a 1/1 left on the board. And we see the Relic of Dimensions coming down, so that's a lot of cheap cards in our opponent's hand. We know that those are all spells. Could be a Setheno combo that's going to be coming down at some point. We're going to have to watch out for that. And we're also going to have to keep in mind that the minions that are going to be coming off of the Artificer Zymox are going to be significantly bigger, just because the Relic of Phantasms and some of the other relics that have been used. So we might actually need either the second Shield Shatter or second Brawl to be able to deal with those. At this point, I mean, we could potentially just bash. We could play the Disruptive Spellbreaker. Again, this is a lot of damage, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it this turn. If we just wanted to spend mana, we could bash. We could Astalor to remove the 1/1, and then just Hero Power. Is that going to be better than Disruptive Spellbreaker? I kind of want to get the Spellbreaker down, even though it causes us to float a mana, just because we might be able to hit one of these severely discounted cards here. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and get this guy down. And worthless to play this. We know they don't have a minion in hand, just based on the deck that we're playing. We hit a Chaos Strike. It's not great, but it is a spell out of our opponent's hand. And likely they're going to have to do some things to be able to remove this 4/6. Hopefully they don't just have a Relic of Extinction here. That makes it really easy, plus they get to push the 10. Next turn, most likely we're going to be going Rakara into Shield Shatter, but you can kind of see that we're starting to run low on cards in hand. Which means we're going to be running low on removal options, so really just kind of concerned about the big minions that are going to come when our opponent chooses to play the Artificer Zymox. I have no idea why I'm having trouble pronouncing that. It doesn't normally happen, but, you know, maybe I'm choking under the pressure of being on camera here, so... Unfortunate day for me. And so we see here, our opponent actually is taking a minion, so... And they've played the minion, which is fine. They get this down on the board, so we're going to clear this anyway, which is good news for us. It gets the spell power off the board. If it was still in hand, it would be tempting to call to the stand just to get that minion out of our opponent's hand, but unfortunately that's not going to be happening here. And so we're going to have a really nice Rakara and Shield Shatter on this turn, and then we'll see where we go from there. And picking up a Shield Slam is nice. Also, Galvangar is going to be active after this turn, so we're going to get down the Rakara and Shield Shatter here again. This is healing us up. This is removing a lot of stuff off the board. And then I have to decide, do I want to swing here? I don't see any reason necessarily to swing. I don't have another weapon in hand. Potentially, there could be a minion that's going to be coming out. We're expecting maybe the Zymox next turn. Just going to hold on to it. No big rush here. Next turn, we actually could just Galvangar and bash. It's going to be something that our opponent is going to have to try to remove. And interestingly enough, we want to be able to remove as many of these 1/1s as we possibly can, because that's going to give our opponent a lot of juice for the hero power here. So we can go bash, Astalor, hero power, and swing into one. So that's going to give us armor. And just removes the minions. I really just don't want to take this damage, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Looks a little bit weird, but again, I'm just trying at this point to make sure that my opponent can't finish me next turn. This gives us a little bit of armor gain. Could even just lay down the Galvangar here and trade into the 1/1. Playing the Astalor now gives us a bit of an option for next turn, though. So I think I'm going to make the play like this. We do float a little bit of mana. We're able to save the Galvangar for removal if we need it, or potentially face damage here. And it just gets all those minions off the board so that we don't have to worry about having repeated hero powers. And we know that our opponent is going to have one more of these Feldori Warbands. So we're going to have to be careful now that their hero card is in play. And this is going to be the Zymox coming down here for sure. Unfortunately, the Bound Soul was discounted there. The good news is that it wasn't infused. And we're actually in pretty okay shape here, I think, for this turn. Let's see, 5, 6. So I can swing into a 7/7, punch it into our opponent's face. And then I can also play this and shield slam an 8/8, and then I can hero power to be able to finish that off. So it is going to leave a 7/7 on the board, but I think it should be fine for one turn. We just have to make sure that we do this in the right order. So we're going to want to do this and shield slam the 8/8 first. And then we can swing into the 7/7, which does cost us some armor, but then we're able to get the armor back, at least some of it. Then we pass it back to our opponent, so we're still nice and healthy, 7/7 on the board. We can trade for that next turn. Our opponent's going to be out of minions now because all of the Relic of Phantasms and the Artificer Zymox is gone. So it really just comes down now to the Lady Satheno combo. And then also keeping in mind, at this point, we could potentially be looking up to set up lethal of our own with Astalor and Captain Galvangar. And just having these big minions on the board is going to prevent our opponent's Lady Satheno from being able to hit us in the face. So likely next turn, the best play is just going to be to play the Astalor. No matter what our opponent does, Astalor is going to be a really good play. If they take this trade, we can hero power Astalor. All that damage goes face, which sets up lethal for the following turn with Galvangar hero power. Let's see, this makes it a little bit interesting here. And they are swinging face. So again, they only have 2 cards in hand, so we're not super worried about what they're going to be able to do here. So I think what we want to do is we can trade hero power, and then we can bash and probably just get the Galvangar down. Our opponent's like running out of stuff. They're pretty much hoping to top deck some type of card draw because they're just running out of things. So we're going to make the play like this. This is going to give us the best possible defensive options here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and get down the Galvangar, and because they're going to be healing anyway, we're just going to take a trade. Again, this cuts down on damage from our opponents. We're going to take 3, they'll get an additional hero power, so this minion's actually worth 5 damage for them, which is bad news for us. And could actually be a Jace coming down here. I wonder what their third minion is. It is a Jace. So how much damage is this? This is actually quite a bit of damage. And you can see here that we're in a little bit of trouble. Really close to being dead. So I guess no Lady Satheno being played in this version of the deck. And we are just almost toast. And Disruptive Spellbreaker is not going to do anything for us. So unfortunately it looks like we've lost this game. I'm going to check. But we're just dead to hero power. We have no way to heal, and we have nothing in hand. So you can see here, we came up just a little bit short, unfortunately, in this particular matchup. It is a tough matchup, but the deck itself has been performing pretty well for me. 9-5, this is actually going to push me to 9-6, so it's going to be roughly about a 60% win rate. It's a small sample size, but Warrior seems to be performing much better. I've been enjoying it, and I feel like it's good on the climb against a lot of these aggro decks. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Uncorrupt.